morning, YouTube. Tyre Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully, you guys are doing well. Hopefully, you're having a good start to your Sunday. Well, this is going to be a busy Sunday from the looks of it for me, because we have now had an upgrade to an enhanced risk for today across Texas. And now, whereas before we were mainly concerned about hail, now all hazards seem to be on the table here. We have now an enhanced risk for all three hazards. All of them have hatched risk. Particularly, I'm concerned about hail still, but now we have the threat for some significant damaging winds and even a tornado being significant possibly too throughout the course of the evening. With that being said, there's a pretty good chance we're going to end up going live tonight. So we'll see what ends up happening there. There's a few errands I got to run. I'll try to knock those out early in the day and get things done quickly here. But this is going to be a short video. We're mainly going to be talking about today. I'm going to get a little bit more in depth with the weather coming into the course of the beginning of the week. I guess probably either tonight if things don't really happen, or maybe tomorrow afternoon. If I have time, I may even try the morning because, I mean, literally just the way things have been lately, you just never can tell what's going to happen. That being said, let's go ahead and look at the models. Really keen on using the HRRR model as of late because it's it did a great job with the high risk on Friday. It was almost identical to exactly what we would end up seeing that day. So you're going to see a lot more of the HRRR in this one. Previous times I used the NAM. But that being said, oops, get that off the screen. Here's the low-level jet starting out the day, and once we get towards the peak time the storms develop, it's not really a whole lot to go with, but once we get to about maybe 8-9 o'clock, that's when things really start to develop with this low-level jet here. Soundings I'm not gonna be too impressed by yet, I don't think. Well, actually, yeah, that is pretty impressive. Earlier this morning when I was looking at soundings before the recent update, and I think this was about a couple model runs ago with HRRR, it wasn't anywhere near this impressive, but this low-level hordeograph curve here is pretty notable. Low-level jet has it at about 40 knots, so that's more than sufficient enough for a tornado, maybe even a strong one. And, well, yeah, that even verifies on the significant tornado parameter, the STP right here. The low-level helicity is pretty daggone strong, too, 580 meters squared per second squared. Cape's kind of lacking with this one, but you don't always necessarily need high cape for a strong storm or high yielding tornado event even. I'm not really concerned, like I said, I'm mainly not concerned about tornadoes. If we actually go back to that sounding there, I want to make note of what you see here. These are lapse rates. Lapse rates are a key factor in not just tornado development, but hail, and that's what I am most concerned with. Here's another really good sounding here, by the way. Cape is also pretty strong at the surface, so that's a pretty good tell that all hazards are on hand here. So that being said, we'll just kind of dive into some of the other parameters here. I'm also going to get Epic Pin up. Just give me 1 second. So we already knew that the surface dew points and the temps were going to be a key factor. There is still a capping inversion, but it's not quite as impressive as before. But it's going to be interesting to see how things kind of develop with that. This is around lunchtime where we're starting to look at this model run here. Storms are going to be pretty quiet at this point. It's really not going to be until later into the afternoon, into the early evening where things will really start to pop off here. You can click on these storms to look at the sounding. There's not going to be, well, oh, okay, I stand corrected. A lot of things have changed in this last little bit here. This is a rapidly developing situation here, but off to the south here, this is a pretty strong helicity curve here. This also has a look of a discrete supercell, too, as indicated even by the, even as indicated by the composite reflectivity, but these numbers are pretty impressive if I were to say so myself. There's also a good bit of D-cape available with this, so damaging winds also could be possible. The lapse rates with this aren't quite as strong, though, so it's going to be interesting to see how this develops here. But looks like I might be going live here tonight. So we'll see what ends up happening with this, and then look what happens as we get later into the evening. Squall line develops, and you can even see just with the reflectivity values here. Here's the index right there. It's almost maxed out. So we could be looking at a increasing hail threat as we get into the evening and overnight hours. And even with this one, the numbers aren't too shabby when it comes to tornado development here. This storm doesn't really seem like it's elevated. The storms really seemed like they were going to be elevated as of yesterday, but a lot seems to be like I said, this seems to be a very quickly developing situation here. Seems like we're getting a lot more discrete supercells with this setup here. Eventually, this does form into a line of storm, so damaging winds do seem possible. But I'm not going to rule out maybe another tornado or two. This is going to be in an isolated area, so this will be a little easier to track at least, unlike Friday's event. So it's going to be interesting to see how things develop today. So we're going to go over the lapse rates really quickly. We don't really need to go over the Cape as much because we already knew that this was going to be a little bit more towards a high yielding Cape event. But the lapse rates are pretty important for picking up on hail potential. So essentially, what a lapse rate is basically, sorry about that. I had to clear my throat. I'm getting tired of you guys having to hear that on videos. But lapse rates are basically a rate in which the air is cooling at different levels of the atmosphere. So basically, from the mid levels onward, if I can get this to stop moving. But basically, from here onward, like if you were to look at this right here, look at this sounding right here. This is not going to have any severe. Okay, it does have severe. But basically, whenever you see the dew points and the air temperatures kind of spread apart like this at different levels of the atmosphere, those are lapse rates. They're mostly going to be a little bit more further apart towards the upper levels, but towards the mid levels is always what we're looking for here. Particularly between 500 to 700 millibars, which is about 10,000 plus feet in the atmosphere. When you see something like that, that's usually a pretty good tell that there's going to be hail potential. Of course, with this setup further off to the north around Oklahoma, it's not going to be impressive. It was more just me trying to show you an example. But the lapse rates do kind of ramp up here across this region around 21Z. This does have a tornado threat with it, but here's a good example of a pretty impressive lapse rate. And also a more favorable environment for severe weather. But that being said, hail potential with this setup is going to be pretty impressive, especially in the early part of the evening. Eventually, I do think damaging winds might take over, but it's kind of hard to tell right now. Because literally 2 HRRR runs ago, this wasn't even that impressive. The HRRR updates every 45 minutes. So yeah, I'm just kind of having to adjust on the fly here a bit. Another thing to look at here is the significant tornado parameter. So apparently there's some pretty notable numbers with this too. So I've been hearing it across the weather community here for the last little bit. I did see some 3s and some 4s, so it doesn't quite surprise me. But look at that number right there. There's a little purple in there, so that would be indicative of a 5. Do a box sounding here. I don't usually do that much. Yeah, we're at about a 4 still. I think this was the same sounding we were looking at earlier. But if you look at all the numbers here, it's pretty impressive still. Like when you look at the Cape values here, getting above 2,500 joules per kilogram at the surface and just over 2,300 at the mixed layer. So more than enough energy in the atmosphere to cause a lot of trouble. So some pretty alarming stuff I'm starting to see here. Well, like I said, I'm going to be live today, so we're going to be keeping an extra close eye on this. But that being said, that's pretty much it for this video. If you like what I did here, of course, hit that like button, subscribe already. Be sure to tune into the live a little bit later today. Plenty going to be going on here, it seems, today. Like I said, welcome to spring, and this one might be a spring to remember. So make sure you're on top of things if you happen to be under severe weather anytime during this season. That being said, hope you guys have a good day. This has been Tyler, your Metalhead Weatherman. I'll see you guys soon.